The Jakor had been watching Earth for months, studying its people, its military, its defenses. To them, Earth seemed like a prize waiting to be claimed. The planet's technological advancements were primitive at best, and their military might was nothing compared to the vast might of the Jakor Empire. The aliens had conquered entire star systems, toppled governments, and wiped out civilizations far more advanced than Earth's. They had seen countless worlds fall without even breaking a sweat. Earth, with its small population and aging infrastructure, seemed like an easy target. Commander Zalthor, a battle-hardened leader of the Jakor invasion fleet, stood at the helm of the command ship, staring out at the blue and white planet below. He had seen the data, heard the reports from his scouts, and made his decision. Earth would fall within a matter of weeks. Their armies would easily crush any resistance, and their superior technology would ensure the human race would submit without a fight. "Prepare the fleet for descent," Zalthor ordered, his voice steady, but filled with the anticipation of victory. "We begin the invasion immediately. Let the humans see what happens when they challenge the might of the Jakor." Around him, his officers nodded in agreement. The Jakor had never lost. Their ships were equipped with advanced weaponry capable of wiping out entire cities with a single strike. Their armor could withstand nearly any conventional weapon, and their soldiers were enhanced by biotechnology that made them faster, stronger, and more resilient than anything humanity could dream of. The invasion would be swift, and any resistance would be crushed underfoot. As the fleet descended through Earth's atmosphere, the first wave of Jakor soldiers landed in key cities around the world. Their massive, hulking forms marched through urban streets, their weapons charged and ready to strike down anything that stood in their way. The Jakor's invasion force moved with precision, confident that the humans would either flee or quickly surrender. But the aliens had made one crucial miscalculation. They had underestimated the very thing that made humanity unique: its will to fight. On the ground, the first signs of resistance appeared within minutes. Military personnel, civilians, and even farmers, armed with nothing more than homemade explosives and hunting rifles, fought back against the invaders. The Jakor expected the humans to scatter in fear, but instead, they began organizing, using guerrilla tactics to harass and disrupt the alien invaders at every turn. It wasn't long before the Jakor realized they were in unfamiliar territory. These humans, with their makeshift weapons and primitive tech, were far more resourceful and unpredictable than the Jakor had anticipated. Zalthor watched from his command ship as the first wave of troops reported in, confusion evident in their transmissions. "Commander, the resistance is stronger than we expected. They're using unconventional tactics, attacking in small, scattered groups. We've lost contact with several units." Zalthor's jaw clenched in frustration. "What do you mean, lost contact? Do not tell me a species this backward is posing a threat." His voice was sharp, but inside, a flicker of doubt began to grow. It didn't make sense. Humans had no power, no technology, and yet here they were, not only fighting back, but doing so with an intensity and creativity that left the Jakor commanders baffled. The Jakor thought they had the upper hand, but as they advanced further into Earth's cities, they realized that they were walking into a web of traps set by humans who had nothing to lose. The humans didn't just fight. They outwitted, outblasted, and outmaneuvered the invaders at every turn. And with each skirmish, the Jakor began to question their initial assessment. Was Earth truly as easy to conquer as they had thought? The aliens had come expecting to find an easy target, but they had underestimated the heart of humanity. And as the sun dipped below the horizon on the first day of the invasion, Zalthor stood in disbelief, staring at the battle unfolding below him. This wasn't a conquest. This was a war, and it was one that the Jakor might not win. As the Jakor forces pushed deeper into Earth's urban centers, they encountered resistance on a scale they had never experienced. Initially, the aliens had assumed that humanity's disorganization would make them easy targets, clumps of civilians running in panic, cities left undefended, military forces unable to cope with a superior invading force. Instead, what the Jokor found was far different. Humans didn't run. They fought back, often in ways that defied all logic. A Jokor scout squad advanced through the ruins of a major city, expecting to find abandoned buildings and frightened civilians. What they encountered instead was a horde of makeshift fighters, armed with a mixture of modern firearms, old military surplus, and homemade explosives. The humans didn't wait to be attacked. They ambushed, attacked from rooftops, and used the rubble of their own cities to create impossible choke points for the alien invaders. It was clear that the Jokor were not in control. Lieutenant Varric, a seasoned Jokor officer, barked orders into his communicator as his squad was pinned down by gunfire. Reposition. We need to flush them out. Deploy the pulse grenades. But even as he gave the orders, Varric could see that their standard tactics weren't working. The humans knew the terrain better, knew how to move through their ruined cities in ways that avoided Jokor detection. What's more, they fought like desperate animals, using every scrap of equipment they had, improvising, adapting, and never giving the aliens a chance to gain a foothold. In a nearby village, a group of farmers armed with nothing more than shotguns and bows laid a trap for a Jokor scouting party. As the aliens approached, the humans triggered a series of explosives hidden beneath the ground, sending a handful of Jokor soldiers into the air in fiery bursts. The rest of the scouting team was ambushed from multiple angles by civilians who had turned their homes into makeshift fortresses. One by one, the Jokor were taken down, not through brute strength, but through the sheer unpredictability of the humans' tactics. Back in the Jokor command ship orbiting Earth, Sulfur stood at a holographic table, watching the reports come in. His face twisted in disbelief as more and more alien units reported setbacks. "What is happening?" he demanded. "How are these primitive creatures holding their own? Why are they using such haphazard tactics?" One of his officers, a young strategist named Cora, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, the humans, they're not fighting the way we expected. It's as if they're improvising. They're using the environment against us, setting traps, attacking in ways that make no sense. It's like they're willing to sacrifice everything to survive." Zolthor slammed his fist on the table, the impact rattling the holo display. "We will crush them. We cannot allow this to continue." Despite his anger, a flicker of doubt remained in Sulfur's mind. The humans' resistance was far more organized than he could have imagined. These weren't just mindless civilians lashing out in panic. They were thinking, calculating, fighting with a tenacity that challenged the very notion of their superiority. The Jokor had underestimated Earth's people, and now they were paying the price. Meanwhile, the humans were not slowing down. News of victories, no matter how small, spread like wildfire across the planet. Videos of humans taking down Jokor soldiers with surprising efficiency circulated among civilians, fueling hope. Around the world, resistance cells began to form, and a sense of unity emerged. What had started as sporadic, disorganized attempts at resistance turned into coordinated efforts. Humanity, despite its flaws, was coming together in the face of extinction, showing that their strength wasn't just in numbers, but in their ability to adapt under pressure. One of the most unexpected aspects of this resistance was the human ability to improvise technology. Groups of engineers, hackers, and scientists quickly began working together to create weapons and devices designed to level the playing field. They reverse-engineered alien technology from captured Jokor ships, using it to develop EMP devices that could disable the invaders' weaponry. But it wasn't just about technology. It was about creativity. It was about finding solutions where there were none, about using whatever resources were available, even if those resources seemed utterly inadequate. On the ground, in the heat of battle, humans found ways to turn even the simplest objects into instruments of war. A broken truck could become a makeshift tank. A school bus could be converted into a mobile barricade. What the Jokor saw as junk, the humans saw as tools for survival. Commander Xalthar's frustrations grew with every passing hour. His forces were increasingly bogged down in one city after another. The battle was no longer a simple conquest. It was a fight for survival. For the first time, he felt the uncertainty of battle creeping into his mind. Had they truly underestimated Earth so completely? Had they misjudged humanity's strength? The question haunted him, gnawing at the edges of his certainty. The Jakor had not only underestimated the humans, they had failed to understand what made them so dangerous. The Earth's inhabitants would not bend. They would not break. And the Jakor were learning that the hard way. As the Jakor struggle to adapt to the unexpected resistance on Earth, humanity's ingenuity begins to shine brighter than ever. What the invaders had seen as primitive, disorganized tactics now evolved into a relentless, coordinated defense. Humans, often seen as outmatched in every category, displayed an unexpected brilliance. Their ability to think on their feet, innovate under pressure, and turn the simplest tools into effective weapons. In the ruins of a major city, Dr. Amelia Grant, a scientist and engineer, worked tirelessly in a makeshift lab. She was part of a growing coalition of humans, engineers, hackers, military leaders, and civilians who had pooled their skills to develop countermeasures against the Jakor. Dr. Grant knew that humanity's survival didn't depend on sheer firepower. It depended on their ability to adapt faster than the aliens could. "I've almost got it," Dr. Grant muttered to herself as she adjusted the circuitry of a small device. It was a crude but effective EMP, electromagnetic pulse, weapon that could disable the Jakor's high-tech weaponry for short bursts. It wasn't much compared to the vast arsenal the invaders possessed, but it was a start. If humanity could disable their technology even for a moment, it could create the opening needed for an attack. At the same time, a group of civilians in a small town in the Midwest had done the unthinkable. They had scavenged a downed Jakor fighter and reverse-engineered it into something useful. Using parts from a junkyard, old vehicles, and the remnants of alien tech, they had constructed a makeshift battle tank, armed with alien energy cannons and reinforced with human ingenuity. The Jakor had sent a small scouting party to deal with the supposed resistance, but the humans were ready. They ambushed the aliens, hitting them with a surprise attack from the tank. The fight was over in minutes, with the Jakor retreating in confusion. These tactics were not the coordinated, large-scale efforts of military forces. They were scrappy, desperate, and fueled by a fierce desire to protect their homes. "We don't need their technology. We just need to use it better than they do," said Jake, the leader of the group. "We've got something they'll never understand: the will to fight for what's ours." Across the globe, similar efforts were underway. In cities ravaged by the invasion, civilians who had once been ordinary workers, farmers, teachers, and factory workers, became innovators overnight. One group of engineers in a coastal city adapted fishing equipment and boats, rigging them with makeshift torpedoes and EMP devices. They launched a daring attack on a Jakor transport ship off the coast, disabling its engines and forcing the invaders to abandon the vessel. The attack sent a shockwave through the Jakor command chain. If these primitive humans could turn fishing boats into weapons, what else could they do? Back in the Jakor command ship, Xalthar watched as one report after another came in. His forces were being outsmarted at every turn. He had expected to encounter resistance, but not this kind of creative, relentless resistance. "What are they doing?" he growled, watching as Jakor soldiers reported losses against civilians using nothing more than old rifles and homemade bombs. "They're learning too quickly," Cora, the young strategist, said. "They're using our technology against us. They're not just adapting to our tactics, they're designing new ways to beat us at our own game." Xalthar clenched his fists. How can this be? They should be quaking in fear, not innovating like this. Cora's voice grew more serious. It's their desperation. They know they have nothing left to lose. These humans, they fight like they're already dead, like they have nothing but their survival. It's making them dangerous. We might be facing something worse than we imagined. Zolthor stared at the holographic map in front of him. Earth's cities were turning into increasingly fortified positions, every corner becoming a trap. There was no easy way forward. He had underestimated the humans' ability to improvise, to create something out of nothing. But it was more than that. They were using their ingenuity to fight in ways that no alien force had ever prepared for. In a remote location, a small group of scientists and military leaders gathered to discuss the growing problem. They were working on a new weapon, something that could potentially turn the tide of the war. But they knew it wasn't just about firepower anymore. It was about understanding the enemy in ways they never had before. The Jacor may have the technology, but the humans had the heart, the drive, and now, the tools to make that heart dangerous. As the days passed, humanity's resistance grew in both size and sophistication. Dr. Grant and others like her had developed a series of anti-Jacor measures, each more effective than the last. Earth's once overwhelming technological inferiority was beginning to shift as humans embraced their creativity and adapted to the alien threat with a ferocity the Jacor had never seen before. One thing became clear to the invaders. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The Jacor thought they were invincible, but now they were learning the hard way. On Earth, the true weapon wasn't advanced technology or overwhelming numbers. It was the power of human ingenuity. The Jacor had believed that the invasion would be nothing more than a formality, a matter of days, perhaps weeks, before Earth was under their control. But with each passing day, they began to realize just how wrong they were. The humans, whose world they had underestimated, were proving to be far more resilient than they had imagined. And now, that resilience was starting to cost the invaders dearly. In one of the largest cities, the Jacor made their move, launching a full-scale assault with overwhelming force. They had decided that a swift and brutal push was necessary to end the resistance once and for all. However, the humans had anticipated the attack and had prepared accordingly. A series of traps, designed to disorient and confuse, were set in place. Rigged buildings, explosive traps, and even hidden EMP devices that temporarily disabled the Jacor's advanced technology. As the alien forces advanced through the city, they were met with a barrage of guerrilla tactics. Human soldiers, many of whom were volunteers with no formal military training, attacked from all sides. They used the knowledge of their environment to their advantage, hiding in collapsed buildings, setting up ambushes in alleyways, and attacking in coordinated groups. With each move, they disoriented the Jacor forces, striking at weak points and retreating before the aliens could retaliate. One of the first major blows came when a Jacor assault unit entered a city block, only to find themselves trapped by a series of old-fashioned mines that had been scavenged from old military stockpiles. The explosives ripped through the streets, taking out several of the invaders in a flash of fire and metal. In the confusion, several Jacor units were separated and isolated, easy targets for well-placed human snipers who had learned to use the city's infrastructure to their advantage. Zolthor, aboard the command ship, watched in horror as the reports came in. "What is happening down there?" he demanded, his voice rising with frustration. "Cora," the young strategist replied, "they've set up complex traps, Commander. It's a coordinated resistance. We underestimated them. They're using the city as a weapon against us, and we're falling right into it." The reports from the ground only grew worse. Jacor forces that had been sent to secure key positions were now bogged down, pinned down by humans who fought from every corner, every shadow. The invaders had relied on their superior numbers and technology, believing it would be enough to overwhelm Earth's defenses. But the humans had no intention of surrendering. They were resourceful, determined, and perhaps most dangerously, they understood their own land better than any invader could. One by one, Jacor squads were reporting heavy casualties. The damage to their equipment and morale was palpable. Their once pristine armor, designed to withstand nearly any weapon, was starting to show signs of wear. They had underestimated the creativity of the humans, and now they were paying for it. Each human victory, no matter how small, was a blow to the Jacquard's overwhelming sense of superiority. In the heat of the battle, a small resistance group managed to infiltrate a key Jacquard supply depot. With a carefully timed strike, they destroyed several transport ships and sabotaged critical supplies. The result was catastrophic. Jacquard troops who had been relying on the depot for reinforcements and weapons were left stranded without the resources they needed. As chaos spread, the invaders began to fracture, their command structure faltering under the strain of unexpected setbacks. Zalthor slammed his fist onto the armrest of his chair. "This cannot be happening," he muttered. "We are the Jacquard. We do not lose. This planet will bow to us." But even as he spoke, he could see the truth in the reports. The Jacquard were losing. Their technology, which had once been their greatest strength, was now becoming a liability. The human resistance had adapted quickly, learning how to exploit weaknesses, and they were fighting with an intensity that even the invaders had not prepared for. Back on the ground, Dr. Amelia Grant, who had been working relentlessly to develop countermeasures, received word that the humans were gaining ground. "It's working," she said, her voice low with disbelief. "They're starting to crack. But we have to keep the pressure on. We cannot let up." The humans, with their ingenuity, had managed to turn the tide. The Jacquard were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. Instead, they were the ones on the defensive, facing a growing human resistance that refused to back down. And for the first time, Zalthor and his commanders realized the full scope of the mistake they had made. They had underestimated Earth's defenders, and now they were paying the price. The Jacquard had tasted their first real defeat, and it tasted bitter. The Jacquard had tasted defeat, and it left a bitter aftertaste that they could not ignore. Despite their superior technology and vast military might, the humans had managed to turn the tide, using the very tools the invaders had taken for granted. For the first time since the invasion began, the Jacquard were on the defensive, scrambling to regain control of the situation. And humanity, emboldened by their success, was only growing stronger. Zalthor stood in his command center, his face taut with frustration and rage. His once confident demeanor had shifted, now replaced by a tense, calculating focus. The reports from the front were a nightmare. Jacquard forces were retreating from several key locations, while the human resistance was spreading across the globe. Cities that had once been completely under Jacquard control were now liberated, and even the high-tech Jacquard weapons were starting to malfunction under the constant barrage of human countermeasures. "Where is the reinforcements? Where are the reinforcements?" Zalthor roared, slamming his fist into the table. "This is a disaster. We cannot lose this planet. We cannot afford it." Cora, the young strategist, spoke quietly, but there was a note of understanding in her voice. "Commander, we've underestimated them. They've adapted faster than we thought possible. It's no longer just a matter of strength. They're fighting smarter. We need a new approach, or we risk losing everything." Zalthor took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. He had been a commander for decades, leading his people to countless victories. But this time, this war, felt different. The humans were unpredictable, their spirit unbreakable. And now, even their tactics had become more sophisticated, more organized. The invaders' advanced weaponry, once thought invincible, was increasingly ineffective against the resourcefulness of the human resistance. On the ground, the momentum was shifting in humanity's favor. Dr. Amelia Grant, who had played a pivotal role in developing the EMP devices, watched the results of her work unfold before her eyes. It was incredible to see how much humanity had accomplished in such a short time. Not only were they turning alien technology against the invaders, but they were also developing their own weapons to counter the Jacquards. With each new innovation, the resistance gained ground, and the invaders were pushed back further. "The balance is tipping," Dr. Grant said, her voice steady but filled with cautious optimism. "If we can keep this up, If we can continue to push them back, we might be able to force a retreat. But we can't let up. Not now. Across the world, resistance fighters were organizing in unprecedented numbers. What had started as small, fragmented pockets of defiance was now a global movement, a united front against the Jacquor. The humans weren't just using brute force. They were using knowledge, intelligence, and sheer willpower to fight. The tables were turning, and even the Jacquor were beginning to realize that Earth wasn't the easy target they had fought. In one particularly pivotal battle, a coalition of human fighters from multiple nations launched a coordinated assault on a Jacquor command center located deep within a heavily fortified area. For days, they had studied the Jacquor's movements, watched their patrols, and mapped their vulnerabilities. It wasn't just about force. It was about precision. The resistance struck when the Jacquor least expected it, using a combination of advanced technology and old-fashioned strategy. As the Jacquor forces tried to regroup, the human resistance attacked in waves, overwhelming them with sheer determination and precision. The battle was fierce, but the Jacquor were not prepared for a fight on this scale, nor for the relentless ingenuity of their human foes. The battle ended in a decisive victory for the humans, forcing the Jacquor to retreat once again. "Unbelievable," Sulfur muttered, watching the reports come in. These creatures are relentless. They've turned the very tactics we use against us." Cora nodded gravely. "It's not just their ingenuity, Commander. They've united. What we thought was a fractured, scattered resistance is now a global force. We underestimated their unity, their resilience. This is no longer... Humanity had turned the tide, and it was only a matter of time before the Jacquor would realize that their invasion had failed. The question now was whether the invaders could adapt fast enough to save themselves, or if Earth's defenders would finally end the war once and for all. The Jacquor were running out of options. The humans, whom they had once thought of as primitive and weak, had turned the tide of the war. Every plan they had tried to implement had been thwarted by the relentless ingenuity of Earth's defenders. Now, with their forces scattered and morale plummeting, the Jacquor faced a critical turning point: adapt or perish. In their desperation, they prepared their final, most dangerous gambit. Zolthar sat in the command center, his face drawn with exhaustion. "We can no longer play by the rules," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else in the room. "The humans have proven too unpredictable, too resourceful. We need to end this war now, before it destroys us completely." Cora, the young strategist, stood beside him, quietly assessing the situation. "I've been analyzing their tactics, Commander. They've caught us off guard at every turn. But there's one thing we've overlooked: their will to survive. If we push them to the brink, they will fight harder than ever. We need something more than just brute force." Zolthar's eyes narrowed as an idea began to form in his mind. He had underestimated the humans in every way, but now he realized there was only one way to win: use their own desperation against them. "We will strike at the heart of their resistance. We will force them to make a choice: surrender or face utter destruction. We'll target their command centers, their infrastructure, and their leaders. We take everything they'd hold dear." And so, the Jacquor unleashed their most devastating weapon yet: a planet-wide assault aimed at destroying Earth's communication networks, cutting off the Resistance's coordination, and shattering the very backbone of humanity's fight. It was a gamble, a dangerous play that could either cripple the humans or ignite a final, catastrophic war. The first wave came swiftly and without warning. Dozens of Jacquor ships descended upon major cities, deploying devastating orbital strikes that obliterated key military and civilian infrastructure. Communication lines went dark, and the power grids flickered out across continents. In the chaos, the human resistance found itself in disarray, leaderless, cut off from vital resources, and reeling from the sudden onslaught. Dr. Amelia Grant, who had been working tirelessly in a covert resistance lab, watched in horror as the lights in her facility went out. The familiar hum of machinery and data servers fell silent. For a moment, she stood frozen, the weight of the situation crashing down on her. But then her resolve hardened. "We can't let them win," she muttered to herself. "We've come too far." Though the Jacors' attack had been brutal, humanity's resilience was far from broken. It wasn't just the leaders or the military who fought. It was everyone. Ordinary citizens, who had once been caught in the chaos of the invasion, now found themselves fighting in new ways. With communication lines down, they began using older analog methods to organize, relying on word of mouth, hand-delivered messages, and handwritten maps. Small, independent resistance cells that had once been isolated now found ways to coordinate, even without the technological infrastructure they had once relied on. People began to improvise even more, turning abandoned factories into new manufacturing hubs, building makeshift radios and signal towers to relay messages. Every setback they encountered only fueled their determination. Humanity's unity was its strength, and as the Jacor advanced on key targets, it became clear that the aliens had underestimated one crucial aspect of Earth's defenders. They would never give up. Meanwhile, the Jacor fleet hovered above Earth, launching wave after wave of attacks. Sulfur watched as the planet below erupted in chaos, and his voice was thick with disdain. "Let them scramble. Let them try to regroup. This will be over soon." But something was shifting. The humans, now more determined than ever, were refusing to fall. Even in the face of devastation, they fought. And as the days passed, Sulfur began to sense that the humans weren't just surviving. They were planning. They were adapting again. Dr. Grant wasn't alone in her determination. Across the globe, resistance groups were organizing, gathering forces, and countering the Jacors' attacks in ways that no one had expected. Their first victory had been a fluke to the invaders. But the humans had taken that small victory and turned it into a strategy, refining their tactics, learning from every mistake. They were no longer scattered rebels. They were a unified force, stronger than ever before. The Jacor had unleashed their last desperate strike, but in doing so, they had awoken something far more dangerous than they had anticipated: the unyielding spirit of humanity. And that spirit was about to ignite a final brutal war that the invaders could never have imagined. The stakes were higher than ever before. This was the last chance for the Jacor to crush humanity's resistance, and the humans knew that now, more than ever, they had to win. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain: Earth was no longer a place to be conquered. It was a place to be defended at all costs. The Jacor had delivered their most devastating blow, believing it would shatter humanity's resolve once and for all. They had crippled Earth's communication networks, knocked out power grids, and left cities in ruins. But instead of crumbling under the weight of their assault, humanity's spirit only burned brighter. The invaders had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the human capacity to endure, to adapt, and to fight back. In the aftermath of the Jacor's bombardment, Dr. Amelia Grant stood among a group of resistance leaders in an underground bunker, surrounded by maps and makeshift communication devices. The room was dim, the air thick with the smell of burning paper and static from old radio equipment. Despite the destruction outside, there was a quiet sense of determination among them. "We've lost contact with most of our forces," Dr. Grant said, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "The Jacor think they've won, but we know they've made a critical mistake. They've underestimated us. They've underestimated our will to fight. Now it's time to show them what humanity is capable of." Across the world, scattered resistance cells had managed to regain some form of communication, using old radio frequencies and even encrypted signals to coordinate. The humans had learned quickly from the Jacor's devastating attack, adapting to the new conditions. They could no longer rely on the advanced technology they had once used, but they didn't need to. Earth's defenders had a different kind of strength, the kind that couldn't be broken by bombs, by alien weapons, or by isolation. One of the most significant turning points came when a small group of resistance fighters in a rural area managed to capture a Jacor supply shuttle that had been sent to reinforce a key base. The shuttle, which had once been considered an impenetrable fortress, was now a symbol of humanity's growing resolve. With their limited knowledge of alien technology, the Resistance engineers quickly learned to reverse engineer parts of the shuttle, using it to create a new devastating weapon. A powerful EMP pulse that could knock out entire Jakor fleets temporarily. Dr. Grant worked feverishly alongside these engineers, using the knowledge he had gained to refine the device and prepare for a massive counterstrike. The EMP weapon was their chance to cripple the Jakor forces once and for all. If they could use it to disable the alien ship's weapons and communication systems, humanity would finally have a fighting chance. The Resistance's first major counterattack came when they launched a coordinated strike on a Jakor stronghold in the Pacific. Using the EMP pulse they had developed, they disabled the aliens' advanced shields and weapons, opening a gap in their defenses. For the first time in months, the Jakor were caught off guard, their superior technology rendered useless. The battle was fierce, but the humans had the advantage. They moved quickly, striking in small, agile units, relying on their knowledge of the terrain and their ability to improvise. Their goal was not to win the battle, but to weaken the Jakor's foothold on Earth, to show them that humanity was no longer an easy target. And with each victory, the humans gained confidence. They could see it now. The invaders were vulnerable. Zolthor, back on the Jakor command ship, watched in disbelief as the reports came in. His forces were being outmaneuvered again. The EMP strikes had been more effective than he had anticipated, leaving entire battalions stranded without communication or support. His ships were drifting, powerless, vulnerable. "This cannot continue," Zolthor muttered, his voice cold with fury. "We will not lose this war to these creatures." But Cora, who had been working tirelessly to develop new strategies to counter humanity's growing strength, spoke up. "Commander, we've underestimated them. The humans are far more capable than we thought. Their adaptation is unlike anything we've ever seen. We need to take a more drastic approach. If we don't regain control, we'll lose everything." Zolthor was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. The Jakor had tried brute force, they had tried deception, and now their last gambit was faltering. But Cora was right. Humanity had shown that it could adapt to any situation, overcome any obstacle. "We'll do whatever it takes," Zolthor finally said, his voice cold and resolute. "But we need to move faster. If we don't crush this resistance soon, they'll only grow stronger." Meanwhile, on Earth, the Resistance's momentum was building. Dr. Grant and the others knew they had a limited window of time before the Jakor could adapt to their new tactics. But for now, the humans had the upper hand. The EMP weapon had proven that the Jakor's technological superiority was not invincible, and it had given Earth's defenders hope. The battle for Earth was far from over, but for the first time, humanity believed that they could win. As the days passed, the humans struck back harder than ever before, and the Jakor found themselves on the back foot, caught in a war they had no idea how to win. Zolthor's confidence was waning, and Dr. Grant and the Resistance knew they had to press their advantage. The final push was coming. The Jakor would either be driven off Earth for good, or humanity would face its ultimate test. But one thing was certain: the Jakor had underestimated the human will to fight, and that mistake was one they could never undo. The Jakor were beginning to feel the full weight of their overconfidence. Earth, a planet they had once considered easy to conquer, had become a battleground unlike any they had ever experienced. Every victory they thought was theirs only served to fuel the unyielding resolve of humanity. What was supposed to be a swift invasion had now become a drawn-out struggle for survival, and the Jakor were realizing, far too late, that they had made an irreversible mistake. Zolthor stood on the bridge of the command ship, staring out at the swirling blue and green of Earth's atmosphere. The once pristine fleet, which had dominated the skies and seas of the planet, was now riddled with damage. A few of their ships were dead in the water, disabled by the EMP strikes. Supplies were running low, and their soldiers were worn thin by the constant guerrilla warfare waged by humanity. "We've lost the initiative," Cora said, her voice calm but filled with an edge of urgency. "Every plan we put into motion has been countered. The humans are no longer the disorganized masses we thought they were. They are coordinated, determined. We cannot afford to underestimate them any longer." Zolthor didn't respond immediately. He had always prided himself on his ability to adapt, to lead his forces to victory. But now, for the first time, doubt crept into his mind. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future. They were resourceful and relentless, willing to sacrifice everything to protect their world. And that was something the Jacquard had never encountered before. Across the globe, humanity's resistance was tightening its grip. The EMP weapons had crippled the Jacquard's ability to communicate and coordinate their forces, and now, the resistance fighters were pushing harder than ever. Small, coordinated attacks disrupted the invaders' supply lines, and even the most heavily fortified Jacquard positions were being overrun. The humans had turned their ingenuity into their greatest weapon, and it was proving to be the Jacquard's undoing. Dr. Amelia Grant had spent the last few days in constant motion, coordinating with various factions of the resistance and refining their strategies. There was no time to rest. The Jacquard were regrouping, and humanity had to act fast before they could launch a counteroffensive. "We need one last push," Dr. Grant said, her voice filled with the weight of finality. "We've damaged their infrastructure, but they're still a threat. We have to take their command center out. If we do that, we'll cripple their ability to fight back." The plan was dangerous, risky even, but it was the only option left. The resistance would infiltrate the heart of the Jacquard's operations, a heavily fortified base that housed their last remaining command and control systems. It was a suicide mission for many, but it was humanity's best chance to end the war once and for all. As the resistance fighters mobilized for the final assault, the Jacquard were making their own desperate preparations. With Earth's defenders pressing harder than ever, Zolthor had ordered his remaining forces to make a last stand. He knew it was their only chance to salvage anything from the ruins of their invasion. "The humans are relentless," Zolthor muttered as he watched his troops prepare for the final confrontation. "But we are the Jacquard. We do not yield. We will show them that this is our victory, and no one can take it from us." But deep down, even Zolthor knew the truth. The Jacquard had already lost. Their forces were shattered, their morale broken, and Earth had proven to be far more resilient than they could have ever imagined. As the final battle unfolded, humanity's forces moved with precision and purpose. They breached the Jacquard's last defenses and infiltrated the command center. The fight was fierce, but the resistance fighters were fueled by the knowledge that they were fighting for their home, for their families, for their future. In a final, desperate move, Zolthor ordered the last of his fleet to make a final assault, hoping to overwhelm the humans in a last-ditch effort. But the humans had already prepared for this. They had learned from every mistake, every encounter. The Jacquard fleet, now weakened and scattered, was no match for the concentrated firepower of humanity's remaining forces. As the battle raged on, Dr. Grant stood at the heart of the command center, watching as the Jacquard's forces began to falter. The final blow came when the resistance detonated a powerful EMP device within the Jacquard's command center, cutting off their communications and disabling their remaining ships. Zolthor, realizing that defeat was inevitable, gave one final order: "Evacuate. Leave this planet. We cannot win. The humans have beaten us." And so, with a final, ignoble retreat, the Jacquard fled Earth, their once mighty fleet broken and scattered. The battle for Earth was over. Humanity had triumphed. As the dust settled and the sounds of war faded, Dr. Grant stood among the resistance fighters, her heart pounding in her chest. They had done it. Against all odds, they had pushed the invaders off their planet. The Jacquard had been defeated, and Earth was free once more. But even as the humans celebrated their hard-won victory, they knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. The Jakor had learned the hard way that Earth was not a world to be conquered. And as humanity looked toward the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with the same determination, resourcefulness, and spirit that had won them the war.